You're tuned into the Writing Community Chat Show, the live streaming YouTube podcast that brings you the stories of authors, screenwriters, and more. Indie or established, this show's for the community, and we invite you to be a part of it. Head to the writingcommunitychatshow.com for more info. The WCCS. Together as one, we get it done.
Hello and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Writing Community Chat Show. We've got a fantastic guest coming up for you tonight, and we've also got a very exciting show because Chris Hooley will know this very well. We've been talking all week and excited about this. We have actually reached our first milestone on YouTube. Thanks to many of you people watching these videos and supporting us. And it's been fantastic, and we were actually accepted. So we talked about it on Wednesday, but we didn't want to get our hopes up in case YouTube didn't accept us into the program. But now they have, which is absolutely amazing. There are members of this already. Anna, whose birthday is today, happy birthday, Anna. She has become a member already, which is absolutely incredible. So she is now a member of our YouTube channel, and you can do the same, which accesses emojis and perks of being a member, which will include special shows and all those kind of good things. So very exciting, and happy birthday to you as well, and thank you for supporting us like that. It's incredible. Chris Hooley, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm slightly apprehensive that we now have emojis as an option for our audience, because I've seen what they're like in the comments, and those emojis might get a little bit out of control. But no, happy days. Hopefully we can get one of those little YouTube plaque things at some point for so many views.
Slow down.
Pretty good. Got to dream big, Agate. But yeah, it's a milestone for the show. And we thank everyone for their support and obviously sticking with us for all these seasons. And hopefully there's a lot more to come from us. And this is just one gatepost that we're going through.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm always the skeptic. I was going to say something weird there of the show, and you're always the person that looks ahead. So just before we came on air, our lovely guest Fiona was chatting to us and asking which kind of presenters that we are. Chris, who did she say? Was it Jonathan Ross and Graham Norton?
Yeah, she said, who's the Graham Norton, who's the Jonathan Ross, are you the Anton Deck, are you the Terry Wogan? So yeah, let us know in the comments who you think we're like, if we're like anyone, or are we unique? Are we original? Or are we very different from them?
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. I don't think we've ever been compared on any of our shows. But yeah, I'm really excited about this whole new partnership program effort on YouTube, and where the next milestone is 4,000. We're 800 hours off that one, and that will be adverts and all that great stuff. But the fact that we made it to this level, I don't think me or Chris really kind of comprehended or believed that was going to happen anytime soon. And suddenly, through the effort, especially the Lock Nation and their support, we have shot up there very quickly. So thank you again. We have got some great guests lined up. We're pretty much getting towards the end of season 12, I want to say, being 13 shows into season 12. So season 13 will be coming up, which is crazy. And we will be looking for other guests and other people to showcase their journeys as well. So we're always open to suggestions, no matter how big of an author or how much of a beginner they are. We like everybody's input as well. So yeah, get those suggestions rolling in. But Chris, how has your week been?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a good week. I'm really excited. Reading Fiona's book this week, obviously with preparation of her coming on the show, and it's got such a great prologue for anyone out there who wants to have a little look and maybe read a couple of pages as this interview is going on. Yeah, I think you'll just get hooked. In fact, maybe wait until after the show, because you might get too hooked that you just completely ignore us for the rest of the time. But yeah, it's a good week, and as you said again, a great guest. We've often said on this show that we are blessed with guests, and 12, nearly 13 seasons in, and that's still the case. And we're privileged for that to be the case. I actually remember when we started out reading a thing about most podcasts don't last longer than 2 years. So we've already beat that milestone. And then most podcasts don't get their own T-shirt. And we got that milestone. And then, as far as I'm aware, no other podcast has had its own beer. And we had that at one point as well. So, yeah, we've done quite a lot of good things.
We have indeed. Hopefully we can get some more sorted out soon. Yeah, I think it's been fantastic. So what I'd like to say to you guys is, if you would love to, I'd love you to hit the like button and subscribe, obviously. But if you have questions for our guest tonight, whether throughout the show or at the end, especially with our question time, please start thinking about questions and send them in. If you have any comments for our guest or for us, send them in as well. We can get them on screen if we want to. And I'm sure you'll light our faces up when we read the comments while we're trying to have a serious conversation at times. But that's the joy of it. So without further ado, I'm going to get tonight's guest on, because we're excited, Chris, and that means we could waffle for ages, and we don't want to do that. We want to get a story of our guest. So are you ready? Shall I introduce our guest?
Yeah, I'd like you to introduce a guest, and I'd like somebody who is a member to see if they can get a waffle emoji going in the comments, because it references the waffle.
Fair enough. Okay, so it's an absolute pleasure to introduce our guest for today. As a best-selling author with a background in journalism and a talent for crafting gripping narratives, Fiona has taken the literary world by storm. Her debut novel, Rattle, not only secured international acclaim, but also set the stage for a remarkable career in the world of storytelling. Fiona's subsequent bestsellers, including The Collector and When I Was 10, have left readers on the edge of their seats, while her creation of the DC Saul Anguish has added a new layer of complexity to the crime fiction genre. So please join us as we delve into a literary journey, her writing processes, and the secrets behind her page-turning narratives. Please welcome Fiona Cummins. Hello, Fiona.
Good evening. I hope you appreciate the fact that I've dressed up for you tonight. So I've put my sparkly top on, my silver eyeshadow, and my pink lipstick. So I have actually made an effort.
Oh my goodness, we are blessed. We appreciate it, and you look fantastic, even in your lovely shed, aka sauna. How are you doing, Fiona?
I'm not too bad, thank you. Yeah, it is quite sauna-like, isn't it? People often mistake it for that, but it's just very cozy. It is nice and warm. It's got a bed. People that have seen me give interviews from here before will know that I love my shed, and I spend a lot of time in it, and it's an excellent way to escape the madness of my house, which is just down the garden.
Yeah, I mean, I would love a writing shed or sauna, whatever it is. I'd love to get out into a independent space, but I'm assuming that gives you a lot of focus time in a place like that for social media, for working.
Yeah, and just to be clear, it is actually a shed. It was a garden shed. It had spades and a lawnmower and everything in it. And it was just because of lockdown, there was nowhere quiet in the house for me to work. So the shed was emptied and insulated, and now is my workspace. And yeah, I mean, I spend most of my working day here. And it is really good. I mean, it is good for just being able to shut the back door, and I don't think, oh, the washing up needs to be done, or I need to put a load of washing on. I can just come up here, and this is my writing space. So and I treat it as that, because otherwise, I mean, I already find it tricky enough, and I don't know whether you guys experience this, or other writers I know do too, is that if you work from home a lot, that the job bleeds into your day. So there is no start and end of your day. It's just there all the time. That's one of the things I miss about kind of a job where you worked in an office and then you came home and you could shut the door and think, right, okay, I can watch, I don't know, 6 hours of Marriage at First Sight or whatever, and and I don't need to think about work at all. Whereas now work is always kind of in the background.
Yeah, so it's definitely nice to separate that and disconnect from your house, because you don't want to really mix them up too much. So you won't find that relaxing kind of state in your house at the end of the day either. But where in the world is your amazing writing shed? Where are you coming from?
So I am in Essex, near Leigh-on-Sea in Essex, which is on the coast, the sort of on the Thames estuary. So we were fully anticipating getting battered by the storm earlier on this week. And it is true to say that at about 4:30 in the morning on Thursday night, I could hear a very ominous dripping sound coming from our loft. So there was a little leak there, but everything is calm. We managed to escape without too much damage. It actually wasn't too bad here. It wasn't as bad as they feared. So, but yeah, so Lee on Sea, nearly on Sea, which is where I grew up actually. And I never anticipated that I would be back here. I lived in London, I've lived in Manchester, I've lived in Glasgow, and sort of came back here and ended up staying. So it's cool. My mum and dad are not far from here. The kids are at school and settled here. And, you know, as I've got older, I have a greater appreciation of where I grew up. My brother always vowed never to return, but, you know, there's the sea, there's the woods, you know, there's lots of kind of lovely walks and things. So yeah, I'm pretty happy here.
Yeah, it's nice to appreciate where you are. Which of those places that you've lived has the best kind of writing community around, like physical, in the area, if that makes sense?
I think that's tricky to say because I've been here for quite a long time and I didn't really become a full-time writer until I was down here. I mean, I was working as a journalist on a national newspaper, and I didn't even think of writing as a career. It just seemed, you know, an impossible thing that it genuinely never occurred to me that people could write books and get paid for them, and I just sort of did my job. And it was only when I moved down here and started to, you know, have a really sort of serious crack at the writing but what I found is that you know, the crime community, which I'm sure you've heard this before, is one of the most inclusive, warmest, most welcoming of the writing communities. And so, you know, one of the joyous things for me about becoming a writer is that I never expected to find a whole new group of friends in my 40s. It wasn't something that I was anticipating. And not only this whole new group of friends, but this group of people who are really like-minded, who love the things that I love, who can speak endlessly about writing and books. And, you know, so that has been a huge joy, actually.
Yeah. It is the power of the writing community online, and we've mentioned it a lot about the Harrogate Crime Writers Festival. We actually met you this year.
Yes.
Yeah, very briefly. I saw your lovely the presentation they did for you, and you got quite emotional there, and it was wonderful to see. Not you getting emotional, but the kind of the attention that gathered, and just the appreciation everyone had for you at the time was absolutely amazing.
And this actually, which is my most prized possession, which is when you're shortlisted for the crime novel of the year at Harrogate, you get a tankard,
nice.
and it's engraved with your name and the year and the book, and it sits in my office, and it reminds me when I'm having a day where I think I can't do this, or I'm rubbish, or everyone else is much better than me, or I'm never gonna, I don't know, achieve what I'd like to achieve. It reminds me that, you know, I can do this. I can do it. I have done it. I will do it.
But it was just so amazing to network with so many people like we have done on Twitter and social media accounts. And the people in this chat right now, we've networked with them for years, and they become our social media friends. And there's been times, say at Harrogate, where we've met some people in real life, and it's kind of a surreal moment, but it's also quite amazing. Tina Baker being the highlight of that this year in Harrogate.
She's got a fantastic personality, hasn't she? She's fabulous. I mean, absolutely. And you know, I remember my first Harrogate. It was in 2015, and I had signed my book deal a couple of months before that, but I knew nobody there apart from my agent and my editor, and it was, you know, kind of terrifying. You're going to these things and it looks like everyone is really close friends, and you know, there's these kind of huge groups of people that all seem to know each other really well, but actually when you sort of dig a little deeper, you realize that other people are just as nervous as you are, you know, just as intimidated, you know, suffering the same feelings of imposter syndrome that you are. And actually what I found, you know, for me anyway, is that I started going to lots of things. So I started going to festivals, I started to go to events or any launches that I was invited to, or anything really. And then over time, you see the same faces there, and you get to know them, and then they become friends, and and then they become your community when you start. There are people that I speak to every day about writing, about publishing, and they're so important in my life. But those years ago, 8 years ago or whatever, I didn't realize that was going to happen. I didn't realize that was the transformation that my life would take on, the path that my career would go down. But yeah, I mean, so I would thoroughly recommend that to anyone who might be watching and who is on the cusp of getting a deal, or has got a deal, or who just wants to get out and about and meet people, because it's amazing. And one of the things that I would say is, when people are sending out proofs and advanced reader copies and things of books, if I've met someone, I'm always probably much more likely to pick up their book and just have a read and see what it's like, because I've chatted to them, because I've met them and stuff. So I think it can be really helpful in a networking kind of way too.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. We are going to get on to the very first part of the show, which is the road to writing. So we're going to play a very little video, and we're going to get into your inspirations and motivations, and hopefully see why and how you got into the writing world in the first place. So, Fiona, what were the first steps into the writing world for you, and what were your inspirations? And was there anyone in particular, or any kind of story in particular, that really kind of made you put that direction in place?
I think a couple of things happened to me, really. I was working at the Daily Mirror, which is a national newspaper. It's a very, very busy office, and it's quite an intense sort of job. At this time, I was doing showbiz. So the first half of my career, I did news and features, and the second half of my career, I did showbiz. It was a very glamorous life in a way. I mean, I did some amazing things. I met some amazing people. I spent one very memorable Valentine's evening in a hotel with George Clooney. I was the last British journalist to interview Michael Jackson. I've met lots of, what we would call kind of global superstars, I suppose. But, something began to happen for me, which is I just fell out of love with the job, because one of the things that I noticed was that, the stories that I would often write for the newspaper would be about people who were at their lowest ebb, so stories that often end up in newspapers are, by their very nature, they can be kind of scandalous, or people going through difficult times. And I kind of just didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to write about people going through these things. So that was kind of one part of it. And then the other thing was that my son, who was not yet 2 at the time, became very ill. In fact, we had a lot of family illness. So my brother's wife, my sister-in-law, she became desperately ill. She just had a baby, and she was then diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma. It was advanced, it was very aggressive. And then within a few weeks of that, my son was hospitalized with a life-threatening illness, and I just had a baby as well. So that whole year when I was on maternity leave from the Mirror just passed in the most horrendous blur. I can barely remember anything about it. But I do remember one little kind of kernel of thought that just kept occurring to me, which is that this realization that we are promised nothing. We are not, none of us are promised a tomorrow. We don't know what's around the corner. And it just made me start thinking about that, and thinking, actually, what am I doing? What do I want to do with my life? And I'd always loved writing, and I thought and so in an incredibly rash move, I just quit my job, and I decided to go freelance as a journalist while also having a go at writing. And I heard the author S.J. Watson, who wrote a book called Before I Go to Sleep. He was talking on the radio, and he was talking about the Faber Academy writing a novel course. And he was just, and I listened to his interview, and I thought, maybe I should have a go at that. And I didn't know whether I could do it. Like, sincerely, the longest thing really I'd ever written was a feature of about 1,200 words. So I had no idea if I could write a manuscript. I had no idea if I could make that segue from non-fiction to fiction. I didn't know if I could do it. And it was quite expensive, the course, if you're not in full-time employment anymore. And I just thought, okay, I'm gonna give it a go. So that's what I did. So my mum looked after the children when they were little, and off I went every Tuesday morning, and I started writing. I started the book that became Rattle while I was doing that course. And it was kind of, the tutor said this, and I think it was a really good point he made, which is, well, he said two things really. He said, while you are here, you have permission to take yourself seriously as a writer. It's not a little hobby. It's not something that may or may not come off. While you are doing this course, you are a writer and you will write. And so that's what I did. I wrote as much of the book as I could in that 6 months. And he also said something else, which has stayed with me, and it stays with me through every book that I write. And it is, finish what you start. And by that, we all, start writing things and we get seduced by a shiny new idea, or, we think it's rubbish, or, we get kind of caught up in, I don't know, feeling like, maybe we're not good enough. Well, certainly that's for me. And actually what I found is that if I just power on through that and I get to the end, you can always make a book better. Plot holes can be filled, characters can be rounded, inconsistencies can be addressed. All of this can be dealt with, but you can't do that if you have nothing on the page. So that was a really useful takeaway for me. And those are the things that I try and kind of keep in my head when I write. So that's how I got into writing. So I did this course, and one of the reasons I was so drawn to it was because at the end of it, they do this day where you get to meet agents and editors. They're invited to come and hear you read your work. And as I was waiting for that day to start on my way, I'd already got an email from an agent who'd read, like, there's a little anthology that goes out and they can read it beforehand, who'd already read it and said, I need to speak to you. Can I speak to you? And so that gave me a little bit of confidence. And then by the end of it, I think I'd had approaches from about 7 agents. So that was really cool. That was a really cool day. But then, of course, as we know, the course of publishing never runs smoothly. And yeah, I'm sure we'll go into that in a bit. But yeah, but that's how I got into writing in the first place. Had no idea if I could do it, genuinely didn't.
It's a fascinating story, even up to that point. And there's obviously a transition between writing non-fiction newspaper kind of work and then stepping into the fictional world. And I know you did a course to get through that. But did you find it a difficult transition, or were you quite comfortable with that?
I don't think I did, because I think one of the useful things, and my agent actually says to me, she often enjoys working with journalists because, journalists are used to working to deadlines. They are quite comfortable with having their work edited. So I'm not precious about my work at all. If someone says to me, this is weak, we can make this better, you can do better with this doesn't work, then I'll go, okay, I'm all ears, I want to make it better. So I was never precious. And I think that was, years and years of being edited. Piers Morgan was my editor when I was at the Mirror for a long time, and him just going, no, you need a different intro, that's not strong enough, so I think you get very used to it. But also one of the things, I have talked about this before, but it was so key, is that when you're writing a newspaper story, whether you're writing a newspaper story or whether you're writing a novel or an opening chapter or a prologue or whatever it is, the end result is still the same, right? You want someone to read it and you want someone to read on. And so with both of those things, newspaper story, book, you need to get to the emotional heart of the story. You need to get to the kernel in the center of that story that is going to make someone go, and whether it is non-fiction or whether it is fiction, the end result is still the same. So many people, they say, I think the statistic is, loads of people wouldn't read further than the first 2 paragraphs of a news story, and you absolutely do not want to give anybody a reason to put your book down. You want to keep people reading. And so with both of those disciplines, that was the thing. So that's what I always did, so you know, perhaps they call it something slightly different in journalism. They call it a human interest story. You know, you're looking for that story, for that element of, you know, a breaking news story that is going to make someone cry, or is going to move someone, or is going to make someone feel something, anything. And that's what I try and do with my fiction. You want people to feel something when they're reading what you do. So yes, it was really interesting, and you know, it is a tough environment. You know, newspapers are not for the faint-hearted. You know, there is a expectations on you, and you have to produce stories day in, day out, and you know, there are tough, big personalities in the newsroom, and so publishing, by contrast, actually seems fairly gentle. So you know, it's but you know, I love it, and now I look back on my years at the paper, and you know, I had a great time. I did some amazing things, but you know, I was ready to move on, and I love what I do now.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Did you have a question in there, Chris?
Fiona, I'm really interested because, yeah, no, I was going to say, obviously, you backed yourself massively. One, by quitting your job. Two, by then forking out a fortune to go on a course. My question is, what advice would you give to somebody who has backed themselves as well in a similar scenario? Let's say they've gone, do you know what, I can't do this day to day anymore. I need to write this book. How do you know that the idea for the book that you run with and the one that you finish is the right idea to essentially launch a career?
It's a really good question, and I don't think you do know the right answer when you're starting out, because one of the things that I would say when you say that is you have to back yourself, because no one else is going to, right? When you're starting out, if you don't back yourself, who else is going to, right? Because you're the one that has to sit there day in, day out, writing that book and believing in it. And sometimes people don't. You know, I was incredibly fortunate in that Rattle is my first book, really, that I wrote. But I think some of that comes from having spent years and years and years in an environment where I'm working with words and working with ideas. And so, but I think one of the things that you can do is really interrogate your idea, right? Because you have to have enough meat on the bones of your idea, right? It's not enough to have a high concept idea or a vague kind of amorphous sense of what you're going to write. You need to drill down into that and think, okay, can I get an 80,000 word manuscript out of this? And how am I going to do that? Because one of the things that happens when you're new to writing is that you can often run out of steam, right? So you get to the 25,000 word mark, and then your story just runs out of steam. So you've got to think about your character development. But I think so personally, I think that you develop an instinct for a story. You know, any writer can develop an instinct for a story. And I think if you think about it, it's like, right, you know, when you go to the pub with your mates, right? And something funny happens in the day, or something happens at work, or I don't know, whatever interesting thing has happened in your week, right? You think about how you tell that story, right? You think about that anecdote, you think about the funniest bit first, or the most heartrending bit, or whatever it is, and you build a story, right? You tell your friends or your family, whoever it is, you start telling them a story, and you know if you've got a good story because the way people react, right? So if you have trusted friends and family who know that you're into writing, then you tell them a bit about your story. You say, okay, I'm going to write this book and this is my idea. And they might go, that's amazing. Or they might go, that sounds a bit boring. And so you can use people around you to test out an idea, to try an idea. But you're absolutely right, Chris. Like, you have to back yourself, especially at the start. No one else is going to. And sometimes you have to keep on backing yourself. The thing that I can't tell your viewers, tell people, because I don't know this myself, is at what point do you stop backing yourself? Because some people will say, you know, keep the faith, keep on going, just keep on going, and it's all going to happen for you, right? It might not. Yeah. But I think there are things that you can do to help yourself, and that's think really carefully about the idea. You know, look at the market, and I don't mean copy the books that are around now, because I love that phrase, once you've spotted a bandwagon, you've already missed it, right? So, but think about the kind of books that are appealing to people and think, okay, do I want to write that kind of book? How can I write that kind of book? And really sort of apply that to what you're seeing editors are buying. Think about it. And like, that's one of the things that I've started to do, is I don't follow the market, but I think about the market, and I think about what readers might like, what they're enjoying, and how I can apply that to my own fiction.
Yeah, great advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a very valid point about knowing when enough is enough in some cases too, because there are those people that could push beyond the point where you did, where you had given up what you had at the time to try and make that happen. But you don't want to go and put too much damage or even get into debt going down that route. And
I wouldn't recommend, like, I genuinely wouldn't recommend quitting your job. I wouldn't. I think it was a series of personal family circumstances for me, and I was driven by emotion rather than anything sensible. And I had some family support. I had husband who was in a job. I had a house that we'd sold and we'd moved, so I had a buffer. I also knew that I could freelance, I had contacts, and I had two young children, and I'd always wanted to make sure that I was kind of around a bit when they were growing up. So, I had all of those things playing in my favor. I would never recommend that anyone give up, a job with a regular income until you're a bit more established. But even when you're established, it doesn't mean that you're going to stay that way. I know people who had several books published, and then for whatever reason they don't get another deal, and things can change overnight. So you have to be always thinking about that, I think, and never take anything for granted. I think it's different if you're, I don't know, Lee Child or someone like that, who is, I listened to an interview that he gave where he was like earning some ridiculous amount every second or something, and then obviously you don't need to worry about your finances. But I think for most of us, you have to be sensible about it as well, and you have to really want it, because it is not an easy job. It's not an easy life. And I would say that my publishing journey goes up and down like that, and I think once you recognize that, you can get your head around it a bit more. But those are tough early lessons when you're starting out, and you think that your life is going to change beyond all measure, and then actually all of these things that people were talking about don't materialize, or the book has disappointing sales or doesn't quite do what people want it to do, and all of those sorts of things. You have to be mentally resilient as well.
Yeah.
Fiona, you've obviously been very successful in, a lot of people that are probably watching the show might think, oh my God, she was living the dream. Like she worked for a national newspaper, and now she's a really successful author. Like, what three things would you say make you successful? Like, what are your habits? What is it that makes you different to other people?
I'm stubborn as fuck.
I love it.
I really am. So like, I said to myself that I was going to write a book and I was going to get a publishing deal before my 40th birthday, and I squeaked it in by about 6 weeks.
Wow.
I am really stubborn, and I will just try to keep on doing something until I achieve what I would like to achieve. I think that there are things that you can do to help yourself, right? So, with the journalism, just a kind of daft example, really, but I knew that I'd wanted to be a journalist. And so even when I was young, when I was like a 15-year-old, I was doing my work experience at the Times, Newsroom, the Telegraph. I went off to Sky TV, and no one gave that to me. I wrote to those places, I organised it myself. I went up to London and did it. Sometimes it's incredibly daunting. These things are terrifying. And then, when I was a bit older, I mean, sometimes I've been a bit reckless. I remember going off to meet a former gangland enforcer in a car park somewhere, and being in slightly hairy situations. There was a guy called Mad Frankie Fraser. He was the that was what he called himself, that he was the enforcer for the Richardson gang in a long time ago, and I met him somewhere, and he gave me his card and said, if you ever get into any trouble and you need anyone to sort it out for you, I'm your man. But I never know whether his tongue was firmly in his cheek then or not. But but anyway, so I'd done all this kind of stuff. So by the time I came to apply to the Daily Mirror, which had a graduate trainee scheme, I had a thick black book of contacts of all sorts of people that I'd spoken to, that I'd met. And I definitely think that was one of the reasons that I got the job on that paper. I think sometimes it is a dose of luck, in my very first day in the Daily Mirror newsroom, myself and another trainee were manning the phone lines, and the Mirror was running a phone in for basically John Prescott, who was a deputy prime minister at the time, had gone off to the Maldives on a fact-finding mission. And anyway, John Prescott's mum rang the phone line, and I picked it up and spoke to her, had a lovely chat with her, and it just happened to be the day that John Prescott was landing back in the UK. First thing he does was to ring his mum. She says, "Oh, I spoke to a lovely girl at the Daily Mirror." He goes ballistic, rings the same phone line. It's my first day. I pick up the phone and the deputy prime minister is on the end of the phone line, absolutely furious. Wow. Shouting, ranting, and so that became the front page the next day. And I think that was one of the things that brought me to the attention of the editor there. So sometimes it's luck, and sometimes it's just putting yourself out there. I talk about earlier about networking, and some people don't like it, some people are uncomfortable with it, but I think you can do so much for yourself by putting yourself out there in the community, because you meet people and connections are made and serendipitous little things happen that might not have happened if you hadn't met that person. So I think you can do loads to help yourself, but I also think that I work quite hard, and I try hard even if I don't achieve things.
So to sum it up, it was being stubborn, aka committed, having luck, as well as being a hard worker.
I think so. I think that's pretty much if you sum it up, but I think most people would say that. I love that it's a well-known phrase, isn't it? But it's funny how the harder I work, the luckier I get. And I think there is sort of something in that. But what I would say as a caveat is that it's not always easy for everyone to do that, right? So yeah. I don't mind I really like doing events. I love doing stuff like this. I like going out to festivals and doing panels. Some people, it is their idea of hell. They feel embarrassed. They're quite introverted. They don't want to be exposed in case they say something stupid or whatever. I've said so many stupid things in my life, and I've done so many embarrassing things that I think I don't think I've got an embarrassment chip anymore. So some of the things that I was made to do when I was at the Mirror were, when I think of it, I just want to curl up and cringe, but I did them because that's what I was sent out to do. And so now I just think it's impossible to feel embarrassed. So but I get that some people are not comfortable with that, so that's a hard thing for people to do. But there are heaps that you can do, and if you don't like that you can make friendships, like you were saying, online, and connections over social media and all sorts of things like that. We'll go to one-on-one lunches. I mean, we all like going for lunch, don't we? Or for a few drinks.
Okay, what we're going to do is move on to part 2 of the show. I know there's a lot more to unpack in there, but we're pushing the time for the sections, and I'm sure there is a lot.
Am I talking too much though?
No, not at all. So part 2 of the show, we're going to have hopefully you've got your book pitches down, and All of Us Are Broken. We want you to kind of what's the word? Describe.
It's an elevator pitch.
Elevator pitch.
Give us your elevator pitch. Yeah.
Yes. Right after this little video. So part 2 is What's the Story? Coming right up. So Fiona, can you please let everybody know what All of Us Are Broken is all about, please?
Well, I just want to say that Chris said elevator pitch, which is like 25 words, isn't it? This is much longer than 25 words, but it does sum up the book. Okay, so it's a second in the series featuring my troubled detective, Saul Anguish, as a As a teenager, he was groomed by a serial killer, and as a young man, he treads the narrow way between light and dark. He's morally ambiguous. And All of Us Are Broken tells a story of Christine Hardwick and her two children, Galen and Tom. And after a difficult year for the family, they set off on a much needed holiday to the Scottish Highlands. But it is their terrible misfortune while they are there to stumble into the path of two extremely dangerous, extremely violent young people called Missy and Fox. And they force Christine into making an impossible choice between the life of her 13-year-old daughter and her 8-year-old son. Ooh. And that's my pitch. That's my pitch for it. So, and I would say one of the things that I really wanted to do with this book was not to shy away from that choice, you know, because it's easy to kind of make it sound, ooh, you know, exciting, and, you know, she's got this terrible choice to make. But then, you know, I didn't want to shy away from that. I wanted her to make a choice, and she does make a choice. And that's one of the things that readers have responded to so brilliantly. Yeah, I mean, I wanted people to, I wanted to put people through the emotional ringer. Like, so in some of my earlier books, you know, some of my characters can be unlikable, they can be very dark, you know, these kind of serial killers or people that do terrible things to each other. This time I wanted to create a family who really loved each other, so that when they went through something terrible, it was all the more difficult for them and for the reader, I think. So that was kind of my ambition with that. Yeah,
it makes a lot of sense. Having that, it's like making the protagonist, the antagonist, someone that you kind of relate to and love, is what makes it even more difficult to hate. So having that love, go on.
Oh no, I was just going to say, you know, that's exactly it. You know, having, you know, someone who's your, you know, your antagonist. So, you know, whether you're talking about kind of Missy and Fox and that, they are violent, they are damaged, but there are reasons that they do what they do. And someone who read a really early version of this book said to me, I think it's a book about love. It's about the twisted love of Missy and Fox. It's about the love that Christine has for her children, and it's about the kind of physical representation of love or lust or whatever between Saul and Blue. And I thought it was really interesting, and I quite like that. So yeah, it's not only about the dark, it's about love in all its forms as well.
Being the second book in the series, did you feel you were comfortable in taking that on and the readers were expecting that second book, or was it something that you felt it was still something you needed the story to be told?
No, I mean, I never wanted to write a series. I've never wanted to write a series because I've got a really low boredom threshold. I think I can't write about the same characters all the time because I will die from boredom. And it was only really writing this character Saul, who does pop up earlier in the collector if anyone's interested. I know lots of readers have discovered that themselves, but you definitely don't need to have read the collector to read Into the Dark, which is the first in the series. But my editor and my publishing house fell in love with the pairing of Saul and Blue, and readers were so responsive to them that they asked me to write another book in the series and then another two, which is what I'm kind of working on now. But yeah, and that is a sort of first time that I felt ready, because I'm just like, oh God, I just don't want to write about it. I want to write a different story. But then I kind of also thought, you know, lots of the writers, especially in crime fiction that we know, who are lucky enough to enjoy longevity, you know, like Anne Cleeves or Val McDermid or Ian Rankin, you know, Mark Billingham, they write returning characters, you know, they write series, and you know, people fall for the characters. And that's one of the things that I started to think about actually as I became a bit more of an experienced writer, is that, you know, often you cannot remember the nuance of plot or story, but you can remember a character who really touches you or who means something to you. So I started thinking about that a lot more, about creating the character, because that's what we remember rather than the story.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that was. Yeah, so they asked me to do this, and so that's, you know, but I didn't know. I mean, you know, All of Us Are Broken is quite dark and violent in places, but I try and handle that with care, and you know, I am actually really thoughtful about the violence in my novels. I try to be. One of the things that was really important for me in this book was making sure that each of the victims in the story has a voice as well, and you know, whether or not you agree with it. You know, one of the things that I often say is that people who perpetrate terrible crimes, they're victims in their own way too, because they're often have had childhoods of, you know, people that do terrible things in real life have often, you know, had childhoods of extreme neglect, abuse, violence, and so victims too in their own way. So I always try and give everyone a voice, and you know, try and give readers an understanding of why people behave in the way they do.
I've got a twofold question that is, you know, designed for the writers listening. How do you craft a great what if is the first part, and the second bit is how do you add subtle nuances to characters and build them over the course of not like a series of novels rather than just the you know, a standalone? What's the difference?
I mean, the what if question, ideas are difficult, aren't they? You know, ideas are hot. You know, if we all had these brilliant ideas all the time, we'd all be writing millions of novels all of the time. You know, you have to examine an idea. And so for me, often what will happen is that I'll hear something on the radio, or someone will say something, or I'll overhear a conversation, or I'll read something, and you know, that little nugget will kind of bury itself somewhere in my brain. And then I'll pick up another element, something else will interest me. So I remember with this book that I wanted to set a book in Scotland because I love the landscape, seascape. There's a lot of the natural world in all of my books, and I'd been to Shannonry Point. Galen, the 13-year-old girl in the novel, she really wants to go and see the wild dolphins at Shannonry Point in Scotland, and I'd been there myself. And so I was really captivated by this idea of the natural world. So that was one element. I was really fascinated at the same time by Bonnie and Clyde. I'd been reading a lot about that. And then I had this idea about, you know, a family who were going through a really difficult time. And so all of those they just sort of amalgamated into this whole story. And I think you have to have various ideas. And then it's trying to find a framework for the idea of what you want to write about. And you know, we often have this sort of silly joke at home about, you know, if you were in a boat and only there are 4 of you in a boat, but only 3 of you could survive, who would you chuck out of the boat, right? Or, you know, often having these kind of silly dilemmas. And I thought, I was thinking one day, God, what if I had to make a choice between, I've got a son and a daughter. What if I had to choose between them? Could I choose between them? Could you, like, you know, not all of us have children, but most of us have people in our lives whom we love. So if you had to choose between your, I don't know, your mum and your dad, or your brother and your sister, or your 2 best friends, could you choose? Who would you choose? Why would you choose them? So all these ideas were going around, and I thought, I knew that it was an idea that had legs. I just knew it. And so that's kind of how I sort of craft my what's if, I suppose. The character question, and I have to credit my agent with this, is right from my very first book, the very first manuscript. She always says the same thing, but why? You know, someone, you know, there are very few people who are just psychopaths, who just kill for the sake of it, right? That is so unbelievably rare. There is always a reason that people do the things they do. What motivates us? Why do you do things that you do? You know, what has happened to you in your life? We're all you know, we're all the sum total of our experiences, you know, 101 tiny prejudices, you know, subconscious choices, decisions, all of those things, they shape who we are. And that is how you get to the heart of your character, because if you are interrogating that idea all the time, why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? Okay, she behaves like that because as a teenager, she was humiliated by her group of friends, and she carries that scar around with her whole life. And even though that was 30 years ago, she still feels the sting of that. And that's why she does this. Why does he do that? Because, I don't know, as a young boy, his father used to make him stand in the garden if he'd done something wrong, and he would hit him 4 times with a belt. and that's why he has that tendency to violence, that's why he does that. And so if you think about this all the time, and for me, I think every character deserves that, however small. It doesn't have to be a big bit. It's just a line here and there, just that nuance that brings your character to life. That gives your character, they don't become 2D, then they're 3D, because no one is wholly evil, no one is wholly good. And so all the time you're looking at those shades of grey all the time, trying to find your way, feel your way into your character. And then once you've done that, then your character kind of, the decisions that they make, the story, the path that they take, kind of, your character then takes their own course, because you've done all this work in finding out who your character is. So you know that your character would behave like this in this circumstance, and that's how your story unfolds. At least that's how it works for me.
Easy. So much good insight there. I don't know how to process it. It's amazing.
Well, I think every writer works in a different way, right? So, I often have this central idea, and when I write, I don't really plan my novels in detail, but I have an idea of what the reveals are going to be and how it's generally going to unfold. Whereas I know other authors who will, spend 20,000 words writing a really detailed plan. So I find it fascinating how we're all so different, but we all get the same result, is that, you hopefully have written a good book. Before we do move on to the third part of the show, when you create your characters, and you talked about potentially using all of their sort of motivations and their sort of desires and just the whole package of a character, do you create kind of a portfolio for that character, or is that completely something that's in your mind? Well, when I started writing a series, I have got this book. It's here. I don't know if you can see it. It says Fiona Cummins, Saul and Blue character notes. So amazing. Someone sent me this, which was amazing. And look how empty it is. Sorry, you can't see it. It's quite empty. There are a few sentences in there. So I started filling it in because, I thought it would be helpful. Blonde hair. Mother Gloria died this date. Father died this date, etc., etc. It's a great idea, but I want to be this very organized, methodical kind of writer, and I'm not. I'm just a chaotic bunch of ideas and stuff, and it's all in my head, but somehow it works. But I want to be. I have writer friends who use spreadsheets. What kind of horror is that? Who would use a spreadsheet? When they would look at me and go, "What utter nonsense! Why have you not written anything down?" That's why you can't find out. I don't know what the birth date of your detective is, because you've got no notice of it anywhere. So I think there's kind of probably room to meet in the middle. It'll be on an Instagram picture someday when the background of your shed is covered in Post-it notes. That will never happen. I can promise you that will never happen. But I have on occasion tried to outline a book, and then I've just gone, this is so boring. Why do I want to outline it? I don't want to write it now I've outlined it. So but I respect everyone else's method, as it were.
That's a great idea, though, and a lovely sentiment for somebody to send you that, because I remember when we spoke to Ian Rankin on the show, and he was having to go back through Rebus books at times. So maybe that book, just jotting little things down that you think, I might need to remember this in the future. But yeah, if you go on to have a career like him, then great. Yeah, and even daft things like the colour of their eyes. You put somewhere that you write, I don't know, somewhat poetically about, I don't know, their grey, their misty grey eyes, and then you're like, are they blue-eyed, or I can't remember anything. So and there'll always be a reader who is eagle-eyed enough to notice that kind of thing. So there'll probably be more than one. Probably be a few of them going, hang on.
Well, I was going to say, and readers, though, in fairness, you owe it to your reader to be accurate, to get it right. If you send an earlier book, they've got grey eyes, and they've got grey eyes. They haven't suddenly got blue eyes. So, it's important that you get that right. Amazing. Right. We're going to move on to part 3 of the show, which is called Community Questions. So if you have questions for Fiona, please send them in now, and we will get them onto the screen after we've asked a few of our wonderful staple questions. So coming right up is part 3.
So, Chris, can you start us off with our staple questions, please?
Yeah, so the first question that we have is, if you could take any character from fiction and make that character your own, which character would you choose and why?
So I was thinking about this earlier, and I just think my my answers are going to be ridiculous. So, have you ever read the Chaos Walking trilogy? So in that book, it's a series of books by Patrick Ness, which are absolutely brilliant. And in that, there is a dog called Manchi. He's a talking dog. You can hear his thoughts. So in these books, it's called The Noise, and you can hear everyone's thoughts, and you can hear Manchi's thoughts. Manchi is an amazing dog, and I would like to take him from that book and take him on lots of adventures with me in a camper van.
Amazing.
Nice.
I love that idea.
We've never had a character be referenced as a dog before. But yeah, I love it. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Amazing. Okay, if you could take the ending of anything, whether that be a TV show, a film, or a book, and change the ending, what ending are you changing and why?
See, I fear that I'm not cerebral enough for your crowd, because I watched, I was talking to my 13-year-old daughter about this before I came on, and we watched Grease the other day, and we decided that it was absolutely ridiculous that Sandy basically has to put on really tight, sexy leather trousers and high heels and perm her hair to become really sexy for John Travolta. And actually, if she wants to just wear her white innocent nightie and a ribbon, she should, right? She shouldn't have to change who she becomes in order to win his love. So we got quite ranty about that. But I think, so that's what I would change. That she can stay who she is and he can be who he is, and they can still fall in love with each other.
Absolutely.
I can see that neither of you two are like feeling the love for Grease. Then, do you
like
Grease?
I've seen it. Yeah, multiple times. I had two.
I would like her to. I would still like the sexiness, and then I would like her to just walk away from John Travolta and go, "No, you had your chance. See you later, mate."
Oh yeah, that's quite cool actually. But then she only became sexy because John Travolta wanted her to become sexy, right? So
yeah.
But I was thinking that maybe I should have really chosen something,
Isn't that like most 90s like rom-coms where like even 10 Things I Hate About You, they will like get the ugly girl to like become attractive to win her over, sort of thing.
Isn't it good that we've moved on from that these days?
Yeah. 90s rom-coms. Yeah.
Okay, what's the rom-com with the big speaker? What's that one? And he's underneath a window. I can't remember what that's called.
What are you talking about? Love Actually?
No, not Love Actually. The one where he's literally holding it up and playing the song. I can't remember off the top of my head. Love Actually is a great rom-com as well.
Thanks.
Let's move on. Sorry. Tangent.
Anyway, I enjoy a lot of literary fiction, honestly, guys.
Yeah, Chris, back to you.
So we're going to go a little bit morbid. I'm trying to speed through these because we're getting close to the end, and we've got some good community questions. But you're on your deathbed, you're looking back at your writing career. What would you be happy with? What is success to you?
Do I have to die to answer this question? Can we just
you won't die if you answer it, but
we're all going to die at some point, so this might be quite nice to sit in the future when we're not here to see what you would have been happy with.
I think I've thought about this, and once upon a time I would have said, well, I mean, and I still would love all of this stuff, I would love to be a consistent Sunday Times #1 bestseller. I would love to walk down the red carpet at the premiere of a film of one of my books, right? So these are the dreams. But actually, in reality, if we're talking about career and writing, what I consider to be success is earning enough money to just keep on writing for as long as I possibly can, because I love this job, and I just, there are very few jobs where someone gives you money to sit in your pajamas and make up shit, right? So, who wants to let that go? I don't, but you have to be practical about these things as well. But so for that, for me, that is success, being able to do this forever.
Yeah, great answer. Okay, let's get a question in from the audience because we are pushing time now. So Anya's got one there. We'll ask this one. If you could interview a famous person at their best and most inspirational, who would it be and why?
Oh, that's a really difficult question. Shall I tell you why? Because I've met a lot of famous people, and what they say about never meeting your heroes is true. They're inevitably a disappointment. So no, I mean, I think meeting. I think fame does something to someone actually, and actually the most famous people I've met are generally the nicest actually, and the people that are sort of a bit famous are not. But to answer the question, who would I most like to? Do you know who I always wanted to interview and I never did because was Prince. I would have loved to interview him at the height of his career. So it's not really to do with writing, although he is a consummate songwriter, and he had a brilliant knack of writing fantastic songs. So I'd probably like to ask him what his secret was with regards to that.
Yeah.
Just on the back of that, because I like Prince as well. If you had to write a book based on any Prince song, which song would you choose?
If I Was Your Girlfriend.
Nice, good choice.
Or maybe The Beautiful Ones. I love that song. Oh, look, to be honest, that's a really difficult question. How am I supposed to answer that? Because I love so much of his stuff, and now I'm gonna go away and think, well, I wish I said that instead. But then I was just trying to cycle through some of the more X-rated lyrics and trying to modify my answers to an appropriate one.
I love the idea of you, because you've interviewed Michael Jackson, maybe leaving and going, I'd still love to interview Prince, to be honest. He's up there, my favourite.
Well, the Michael Jackson thing was so weird, and it was like it wasn't real. We waited for about 5 hours in this room. We had to be vetted. We had to meet various people before we were allowed in there. And my favourite story really about this is that the photographer and I were sitting, waiting. We didn't really think it was going to happen. And then the door opens and Michael Jackson walks in, and he is exactly as you would imagine him to be. And the photographer turns to me and goes, "Fuck me, it's Michael Jackson." Because when you meet famous people, I've never been starstruck. I was way more starstruck meeting people like Val McDermid or Lee Child than I ever was meeting celebrities in a way. But he was at that time probably one of the biggest superstar in the world, and yet there are controversies around him and there are complexities around his story. But if you distill it down to the fact that he was just probably one of the most famous people on the planet, it was a very interesting experience, and that was all the photographer could manage, because we were both like, oh my god. It was very odd. Yeah.
How, if you remember, did you open that conversation?
I remember feeling really so. We kind of tried to talk to him. He was very difficult to talk to. He had his glasses on, and he looked exactly as you would expect him to look. He looked exactly as he did in the photographs. And I wrote about this, but he smelt very distinctly of lavender. And he put his arm around us for a hug for the photos, and he's very sort of muscular. And that's what I remember actually. And that's a really good writing tip as well. That sort of sense, that real sort of visceral sense of a person, because it's easy to describe what someone looks like, but actually it brings things much more to life if you think about how they feel, how they smell, all of that kind of thing. You were asking about character earlier, but actually, who would have thought that Michael Jackson would have smelled of lavender, and yet he did.
Yeah, amazing. Very interesting.
Prince wouldn't have made you wait 5 hours. Not a chance.
What do you think? What do you think?
I like to think that there would have been a magnetic attraction between me and Prince, and that I would have become his girlfriend.
What do you think he would have smelled like?
I don't know. I think he might have smelled quite au naturel.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't actually know.
Prince would have smelled of just pure and utter sex.
Also, he's quite little and I'm quite little, so I think we would have made a good match as far as that's concerned as well.
Yeah. Interesting conversation. Okay.
Anyway,
right. We're going to have to wrap it up. I know Halo sent some questions in, so apologize for not reading those. We are 5 minutes over. So we'll finish up with Fiona. Where can people find your work? Where can they people find out more information about you? And can they follow you on social media, for example?
Yeah, so I'm terrible at Facebook, so I wouldn't bother looking at me there. I do have a page, but I wouldn't bother visiting it. That's not very good sell, is it? You can find me on Twitter/X. I'm there a lot, and I'm always, my DMs are open. If you have any questions about writing, or need any advice or any guidance on anything, I'm always happy to help and answer those kind of questions. I'm on Instagram as well, and yeah, I'm around and I'm up for chatting, and there's lots of events you can, if you want to find out where I might be appearing and things that I'm doing, you can find that out through social media as well. So
where can they buy your books?
Oh, you can get them most places, from the usual digital channels, like Amazon and Audio, sort of Apple, Kobo, those kind of places, Waterstones, some of the supermarkets, WH Smith, independent bookshops, use your independent bookshops, everywhere.
And again, finally, are you going to any events soon, or are you doing any signings?
So the next thing in my diary is the book party. It's on the 25th of November, and that's in Birmingham. It's like a Christmas party. So I don't know if there's any tickets left for that, but I shall be there. And I'm at Noir at the Bar in Edinburgh on the 30th of November. So if you're around that way, do come and say hello.
Amazing. I hope you have a good time at the book party. That looks amazing. Hopefully next year we'll be there. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me as well. It's been brilliant.
You've been wonderful, and great show. Halo says in the comments. Thank you so much for your comments, guys. Please do go and check out All of Us Are Broken, and obviously the back catalogue. The links to Fiona's information is in the description of the video. Please do check that out and buy her book. As she said, support local bookstores if you're going to do it that way as well. But thank you so much, Fiona. Loving your conversation, loving the fact you're coming from your shed. And it's been brilliant. Chris, anything for you before we finish up?
No, it's not often that writers come on the show and invite people to ask them questions in the DMs. So take the opportunity to slide into Fiona's DMs and ask her lots of writing questions. Get All of Us Are Broken.
Chris says that as he's licking his lips. There you go, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. It's Bonfire. It's the 5th of November.
Sunday?
Not today.
Sunday.
Yeah,
Sunday. So this weekend, if you're doing anything like that, please stay very safe, and we'll see you again next week. And again, thank you so much for supporting us and getting us to this amazing milestone. We've loved you joining us in the chat and supporting us in that way. So thank you so much. We'll see you all very soon. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.